Is that sexy? Hello everybody. I've got my romantic voice on today because it's nearly Love Day, aka Valentine's Day, and as I am the most romantic person, I have been chosen to show you a cake. At least I think that's why. So I'm going to show you guys how to make a really cute cake for your Valentine today. Maybe that's your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your best friend, your cat, your dad, your mum. Maybe it's just for yourself. You choose. It's important to love yourself. So I'm going to show you how to make a really cute heart-shaped cake. I'm going to go for chocolate because that's what I want on Valentine's Day, and we're going to decorate it with loads of piping techniques. That kind of vintage piping, Lambeth piping, whatever you want to call it. It's going to be really beautiful. It's going to look a little bit tricky, but I'm going to talk you through every single technique, and it's something fun to have a little play with at home. If it doesn't look quite like mine, it doesn't really matter, just enjoy it. Now, just a couple more things that I want to mention before we crack on. One of them is Valentine's Day. So on Valentine's itself, which is the 14th of Feb, Dane, Gemma, Nikki and the gang are going to be at Crumbs and Doilies in Soho personalising your cupcakes for your loved ones, possibly for free. Don't quote me on that, I'm getting a nod. It's for free. So come on down, meet the guys, get a lovely little cupcake made for you, your loved one, whoever it is. Also, just a big thank you to everyone that joined the live bake-along a couple of weeks ago. It was so great to see so many of you there. I know the guys had so much fun making it, and I believe there's another one coming up in a couple of weeks at the end of February. So if you want to know more about that, then head over to patreon.com/Cupcake Gemma and join the Bake Club. You can find everything out about it there. Super great fun. You get to bake along with Gemma and Dane. So, should we get on with this Valentine's cake? Yes, alrighty. So, Dane, my one true love, baked some sponges for me yesterday. I've got 5 8-inch chocolate cakes here. Recipe, of course, is in the description box below. Now, the first thing we're going to do is trim these down to make them level. So, of course, I've got my leveler. So I'm trying to take off as little as possible with my cake leveler here, and I'm just doing some nice big strokes across the top of the cake just to make each one nice and level. Alrighty, so that's our 5 layers of sponge, nice and level. I've gone for 5 rather than the usual 4 because I want this to be a little bit tall, because we're going to do loads of piping around the kind of outside of the cake. If it's a little bit short, it can get a bit too kind of crowded on there. So that's why I'm going for height. You can just do 4 layers if you want to. So, also, you can just leave it round, but as it is Love Day, I'm gonna make my cake into a heart shape. So I've just cut a template so that I can trim out each layer. Now this is really, really easy to do. What I did first was just cut the size of my cake, so 8-inch circle, and cut it out of some greaseproof paper. And then you wanna fold it in half. And now I'm just going to take a pen. I'm going to draw half of a heart shape. I'm trying to kind of cut off as little as possible so that we get maximum cake. And then I'm going to take my scissors and cut that out. And then when you open it up, a pretty little heart. You can always then kind of trim it down again if it doesn't look quite right. But now we can use this as our template. So I have to. So what I'm going to do is actually move my sponge onto a chopping board because I don't want to get in trouble here and cut the table. So I'm going to place my stencil on top of the sponge, and then I'm taking a really sharp little knife here. I like to use a little one just to get more kind of control over it. And I'm going to keep my hand on top of the template and go up and down with my knife, doing tiny little cuts, following the shape of my stencil. Is all of the hearts cut out. Now, just one other thing that I was doing that I wanted to tell you is when you're doing this with the knife, you want to really make sure that the knife is staying completely upright. It's not kind of angling outwards or inwards, so that, you know, the sides of your cake are really nice and straight. So that's just one thing to kind of look out for, is that you're trying to keep that knife upright. So let's get filling. So I've got my board ready here, and now I've got 2 buttercreams because I want to fill my cake with chocolate buttercream, but I'm gonna do a little barrier of pink. I'll get onto that, let's just get this bit done. So a little bit of buttercream just to stick our first layer of sponge down. This doesn't need to be neat or anything. And then we're gonna pick it up and pop it in the middle of the board and give it a little squish down. Now, because I'm gonna ice the outside of my cake in pink, I don't wanna risk getting any chocolate filling into that kind of outside layer. So I filled up a piping bag with some of my pink Swiss meringue buttercream, and I'm gonna start by just piping a kind of like a barrier, like a safety barrier around the edge of the cake, and then I'm gonna fill that with the chocolate buttercream. And then we're just gonna build up the cake doing the same thing. So plop on layer number 2, and then I like to get down low with the cake and just make sure it's nice and lined up, and then again we'll give it a squish. And like I said, don't worry if the edges are a little bit uneven, like maybe they're not kind of lining up properly. We're going to do a little bit of a trim a bit later on. So this can be a little bit tricky, trying to fill this shape and not smush the two buttercreams together. So you can see that I'm just using kind of the tip of the palette knife just to very gently, little by little, spread the icing into place. So really like telling it where to go. So I'm just using that very tip of it. Right, top piece is going on, and as usual, we're going to flip it upside down and pop it on top. The reason we do that is that this underneath side is a lot easier to ice, got less crumbs in there. So now this is where you can, trim this down a little bit should you need to, if you've got any bits kind of sticking out. I'm pretty happy with this, and actually none of this is enough to really make much of an impact. So what's next is to cover it in buttercream. Seeing as I've already got it in a piping bag, I'm gonna do it with a piping bag. It's actually easier, especially if you've got a really tall cake. We wanna get like an even coverage from bottom to top with buttercream, and doing it with a piping bag is so much easier and it's quicker. Now that all the buttercream is on the cake, I'm going to start with my little cranked palette knife, and I'm going to spread out the icing on the top of the cake. We don't need to try and make this super smooth at this stage, we're just trying to cover the whole cake so you can't see any more chocolate. And now I'm going to move on to the sides. This time I'm going to use my large straight palette knife just because I find it a lot quicker, but you can stick with the little one if you're finding you get more control with it. So now the whole cake is covered with buttercream. It's not looking smooth or neat or anything. When we're spreading the icing out with a palette knife, all we're doing is trying to spread the icing and cover every single bit of cake. Now when we are going to smooth it, we're going to move on to using our scraper. So I have the normal smoother here, but you can see it's quite a bit shorter than my cake. So we do have the big ones as well. You can kind of, I would say, have a few different types of smoother, because sometimes I find the big one actually quite hard to control, and I might go around with the little one anyway and just sort of do top and bottom. You kind of want to just do what feels most comfortable to you. Now this is going to be a crumb coat, so we're not trying to get it like super duper smooth. If there's air bubbles and lines in it, it really doesn't matter. What we're looking for is like the structure. So nice straight sides, sharp corners, and we've got that lovely heart shape. So when we smooth the sides of the cake, we're pushing the icing upwards. So now we've got this kind of lip of icing around the top, and we're going to use that to kind of smooth out the top. So using my little smoother for this, we're going to cover one section and we're going to cut across the cake, pulling in those little edges, applying a bit of pressure in towards the top of the cake so that we are smoothing it as well. And remember, these air bubbles and stuff do not matter at this stage. This is just the crumb coat. As long as it's nice and flat, that's all we're looking for. And that is stage one done. As you can see, there are lots of air bubbles and stuff in it, but I'm really not going to panic myself about this because it is just the crumb coat. Don't stress yourself out doing this. we'll stress ourselves out later instead. So this is going to go into the fridge to firm up. We want to leave it in the fridge until it's firm to the touch. You can leave it in for quite a long time, but just be wary that the longer you leave it in the fridge, the colder the cake will get, which means the quicker your icing will set when we come to top coat it. So I like to do it until it's just firm to the touch. It's probably going to be about half an hour today. So it's been about half an hour and the cake is just firm to the touch. It's a little bit tacky, but that's because we're using Swiss meringue buttercream, and Swiss meringue never really fully sets totally firm like American buttercream does. So, you know, it's a little bit tacky to the touch, but I can tell it's nice and firm underneath. So I have reloaded my piping bag with pink buttercream because it's now time to give this a top coat. And again, it's just so much easier to apply a cake this size and shape with the piping bag. So I'm going to do the same thing as I did before. I've maybe put too much in here to handle, but let's just wing it. So just covering the whole thing again in this pink buttercream. And we're just going to do the exact same thing as we did with the crumb coat, spreading out the top icing with the small palette knife and then switching to the large one for the sides. And remember, we're not trying to make this smooth and neat. All we're trying to do is cover the cake with buttercream. And now it's time to start smoothing it and making it look pretty. So again, switching back to the cake smoother. First time around, what we're trying to do is just even the buttercream out a little bit, take off any excess and get that shape of the heart back again because it's kind of lost the crack as the top bit, whatever we're going to call it. So I'm just going to start applying a little bit of pressure with my smoother just to dig that back out again, and I am removing excess each time. Remember, every time you remove excess, we want to wipe it off on the bowl so that we get rid of it so it's not going back on the cake. So let's just try and find the shape a little bit and even out our buttercream. So I've found the shape of the heart again, and icing's nice and even. I've got lots of little air bubbles, but there's no kind of big craters in there. If you have got big holes, then just go ahead and fill those in first. Now we're just going to move on to smoothing. So I'm going to try and get rid of as many air bubbles as I can, but I always tell people to think about what the end cake is going to look like. The chances of you icing just a totally plain cake is quite slim. We're going to put piping all over this cake, so if you've got a few little marks and air bubbles here and there, like, please do not panic about it. Like, you're never going to notice them at the end. So don't stress is what I'm trying to say. This should be fun. So let's get to smoothing. So for smoothing, it's exactly the same process. All I'm doing is lightening up the pressure in my hand. So I'm not digging my smoother into the side. I'm just letting it kind of very gently like stroke the side of the cake. So you can see that I've now actually switched to using this like flexi smoother, really, really bendy. They're really great when at kind of smoothing cakes that are of an odd shape. And the trick is to just pop it on the side of the cake and not really put any pressure in, and just let it take the shape of the cake as it goes. And that way it'll kind of smooth around any kind of strange shapes that you're finding it difficult to get into with such a rigid cake smoother. They're also great at getting rid of air bubbles. So if you are one of those people that wants to get rid of all of them, I'd get yourself some of these because they're really great. We're going to use the small smoother again just to pull in the edges that we've created from smoothing the sides. So take the smoother, cover the top edge and cut it across using a little bit of pressure in towards the cake so that we're smoothing it out at the same time. So I have filled up a selection of piping bags with some buttercream. I'm gonna go mainly pink, but with a little bit of red because it is love day and nothing says love day than the color red. Right, so the first nozzle I'm gonna be using is this. Now this is traditionally used as a petal to make like roses, but we're gonna use it to make some ruffles. So you can see It's got a thick end and it's got a thin end. Now the thin end is the bit that's going to make the cute shape. So that's the bit that we want to see. So I'm going to show you what we're going to do on this board. So I've got the thin bit facing you guys and I'm keeping my piping bag completely flat. All I'm going to do is some upward downward motion. So I'm just going up, down, up, down, up, down as I move from left to right. From where you're looking, it's really cute and it's got this really dainty little ruffle going on. If you look at it from the other side, it's real chunky. So if you see the chunky side, you need to switch your bag upside down. Now I'm going to do this around the bottom of the cake. Now I'm going to bring it out slightly so there's going to be a gap between the piping and the cake, but don't worry, we are going to cover that up in a little bit and you'll see why. I'm actually going to start from the back and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start. So up, down, up, down. You can go really nice and slowly. This doesn't need to be fast. You can be in total control of what you're doing. And you can always stop, turn the cake a little bit and then continue. All right, so I know that looks a little bit weird because there's this odd gap between the cake and the piping, but the reason why is because I'm now going to use this piping nozzle and it's quite chunky. So you can see it's got all these little spikes, tiny little spikes around the top, and this is a JEM1ES, and what we're going to do is it's a trim, basically. It's like beading. We're gonna make little shell shapes. Now, what I'm gonna do is have my piping bag at an angle like this. I'm gonna get it into position. I'm gonna start squeezing and I'm gonna let the shape fill up and then I'm gonna swipe down into the surface. Now I'm gonna do the next one on the tail. So squeeze, 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 and then swipe. So now we're going to do that in the gap between the ruffle and the cake. I'm also going to do this exact same technique around the top of the cake. Okay, so that's the really big nozzles done. Now we're going to do a little bit of detail. The first thing I'm going to do is some love heart shapes around the side. So I've cut a little heart here and I'm going to use this as my stencil. So this one's going to go on the front of the cake. I'm going to place the stencil very lightly over the buttercream and I'm going to use this sharp pokey stick to score a line around the heart, and that's what I'm going to follow with the piping. So I know this looks a bit weird and scrappy and like I've just scratched up my lovely smooth cake, but we're not going to see any of it, and it is so worth doing because trying to draw a heart or a ruffle or a drape freehand is so difficult. So don't worry, we're going to cover it all up. Now I've swapped to a little nozzle now. We're going for red. This is a Wilton 18. It's a tiny version of the one that we just had. So we're going to do the exact same technique but with this little one. So now we're just going to do that technique following the shape of our heart. I'm sitting down and I'm trying to get my elbows against the table to really steady myself when I do this. So now I've got the exact same nozzle but with some pink buttercream, and I'm going to start by piping a shell on top of our first chunky one. And we're also going to do this nozzle at the top of the cake. So now we're going to move back to the red icing, the same small nozzle. We're going to do a figure of 8. So what I mean by that is I'm going to do a continuous squeeze and I'm going to loop one way and then I'm going to loop the other way. And I'm going to pipe this in between the big and the small shell at the bottom of the cake. And I'm going to do that same technique but directly on the very top of the cake. Now it wouldn't be Valentine's without some red roses, so I'm going to use the very same nozzle, the really little one, and I'm going to do some very tiny rosettes. So a little squeeze and then wrap around it and pull away. Now lastly, I'm going to add some little leaves to these roses. So we've got this nozzle here, which is a Wilton 352. It's got a sort of triangle cut out of it. And what we're going to do is have it this way around, so the spikes are top and bottom. I'm going to come into the side of the rose, I'm going to spike right into the side of it, I'm going to squeeze, I'm going to stop squeezing and then pull away. I think I'm gonna stop there. This is one of those cakes that you could just go on and on and on and just cover it. By all means do, but I think I'm pretty happy with mine. I love the kind of pop of the red, but keeping it just two-tone, love it. It's huge, I understand that, but it's to show you guys how much I love you. Of course, you can make this much smaller if you want to do a little one. Same technique, just cut a smaller heart to begin with. Remember to check the description box for all the quantities if you want to make this exact cake. And if you want to get your hands on any of these nozzles, then head to cupcakegemma.com. You can get like a set of the big ones and a set of the small ones, so you can have a play around. Like, I'd always recommend practicing on the surface or on a chopping board or something to really get into the swing of it. Also, if you want to learn more about this kind of technique, then I do one of my baking classes, which is dedicated to the vintage piping. So you'll get to have a practice with me there to help you, and you'll go home with a cake looking as extravagant as this. So head over to bakingclasses.com. .co.uk, how do I not know my own website? If you want to come along to one of my classes. Don't forget to head to Soho, grab some doilies Soho on Valentine's itself, because Dane, Gemma and Nikki will be there piping your personalised cupcakes. And of course, join the Bake Club, patreon.com/cupcakegemma, where you'll get all the information about joining one of the bake-alongs. And there's loads of other cool stuff up there as well, so just go and join it. It's really fun. I will be back very soon. In the meantime, enjoy Love Day. I know I will.